name is Claire Haley. I'm the Vice President of Public Relations and Programs for the History Center. And we are so thrilled that all of you are able to join us tonight and that we have two very special guests with us this evening. Tonight's featured author is Kwame Onwuachi. He'll be discussing his brand new book just published last week, My America, Recipes from a Young Black Chef. He'll be in conversation tonight with Vallery Lomas. If you have not yet purchased your copy of the book, you can do so from Atlanta History Center's museum shop. It is 25% off tonight only. And if you live in Atlanta, you can come grab it for us, or we'll ship it to you. If you're in the continental US, sorry, Canada. But when you purchase from us, you help support our Author Talk series, our ability to offer these talks, and also the mission of the Atlanta History Center. So thank you for doing that. If you have questions for our guests tonight, they will be taking those at the end of the program. But as they talk, please drop those in the Q&A, and we will get to as many of them as we possibly can in the brief time that we're together tonight. I'm going to briefly introduce tonight's guest and then turn it over to Vallery to begin the conversation. As I mentioned, tonight's author is Kwame Onwuachi. He is a James Beard award-winning chef born on Long Island, raised in New York City, Nigeria, and Louisiana. He's a former Top Chef contestant, and he was named Esquire's Best Chef of the Year, one of Food and Wine's Best New Chefs, and a 30 Under 30 honoree by Forbes. He trained at the Culinary Institute of America and opened 5 restaurants before turning 30. He lives in Los Angeles, and somehow between all of that found time to write this book. So Kwame, thank you so much for being here tonight. He'll be in conversation with Vallery Lomas. She is a baker. She is the author of the cookbook, Life is What You Bake It. She is from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And she was one of the contestants on the Great American Baking Show. She won the Great American Baking Show, which is incredible. Her cookbook came out last year, and she writes for a variety of publications, including the Wall Street Journal column, The Bakeaway, and a contributor to the New York Times. So 2 extremely distinguished guests with us tonight. Y'all are in for a treat, pun fully intended. So thank you, Vallery and Kwame, for being with us tonight, and welcome virtually to Atlanta.
Thank you, Claire, for that introduction, and thank you everyone for joining. Kwame.
What's up?
Hi. We are going to talk about it's not your new cookbook, it's your first cookbook.
First one.
Yeah, and it feels like because your first book, which was more autobiographical, did so amazingly and was such an amazing bestseller, it's like we've all been waiting for this book that I think in some ways is a continuation of your first book. Absolutely. Because you tell all of these stories of your, very amazing background where you've lived in places from New York to Nigeria. But in this book, we get the recipes for those foods. So, let's just start off with, the beginning of the book, because I thought the first opening lines were so powerful, where you talk about, the America of baseball games and apple pies wasn't something that you could relate to because your experience growing up in the Bronx would be unrecognizable to a lot of those, kind of like typical American experiences that we think of from this one singular lens that probably most of the country can't relate to. So what is America to you, and how is that reflected in your cookbook?
Yeah, I think America and American cuisine is like a moving target, because what makes America is the people that inhabit it. And it is such a diverse group of people. Everybody has their own version of what they grew up eating. When you're at home and your parents put something in front of you, you're not asking what nationality is this dish. You know that you're in America, you're eating food, and you just assume that everybody's eating the same thing that you're eating. But that's far from the truth. When you go to and have sleepovers, when you go to school and you start like meeting other people, you realize that everyone has a different perspective. And this was just my perspective, and that's why it's My America. My American cuisine was oxtails and curry goat and suya and jollof rice and egusi soup and jambalaya. And I had all of these influences. And I think it really tells a story of America and its cuisine because of the heavy influence of West Africa on, in the lexicon of American dishes.
Yeah. And one of the things that I love about the book is it's not separated by these different places that influenced you. So,
No.
there's no Louisiana chapter or, a New York City chapter where you talk about all of the different influences in the Bronx. You kind of put everything together. And in some cases, like with the jerk barbecue sauce, you're actually taking two very distinctive sauces from somewhat disparate cuisines, and you're showing that interconnectedness, that we can find throughout like diasporic cuisine, which you talk about, but also in like a little bit more of an innovative and sometimes critiqued way, because some people are like, hey, don't put barbecue sauce in my jerk sauce.
Sure. And I think that's where it gets into like what is authentic, you know what I mean? Because like even being in Jamaica, they put jerk sauce on it, which is a ketchup based sauce that they squeeze onto the jerk chicken. And yeah, I think this book really highlights the crossroads between different cultures. I spent a lot of time in fine dining kitchens, and I use a lot of those techniques and applied them to this book, but it did not remove the soul of these dishes. The jerk chicken is still jerk chicken. It may have a brine, that you sit the chicken in for 24 hours. We're making the jerk paste from scratch. We're making a jerk barbecue sauce, but we're still smoking it in pimento wood, and there's still that heat of that pepper sauce that's still in it. So yeah, it was quite a journey, like writing this book, because you have your recipes, but I think it's just as much as a piece of literature, like it's a book as well. It is a cookbook because of the anecdotes that are in front of these recipes.
Yeah, and that's a really great point because, obviously your first book, Notes from a Young Black Chef, was very much storytelling. Whereas in this book, we've got recipes, we've got techniques, we've got photographs, but we also have these beautifully written head notes. And in almost every chapter, there's like, you take each place that had a huge influence on you and you write kind of like a complete essay about that place. So, in the head notes, you're telling us the history of a lot of these dishes.
Yeah, and I think it's a history that needs to be explained. Like there's a whole chapter on rice, and it talks about how rice was taken from West Africa and transplanted here. And with that crop came the people, because the Americans didn't know how to grow the rice. So they needed people to figure that out. And it's such a bittersweet moment for our history, but it's also so important in the cuisine that really identifies me, whether it's Southern or Jamaican or West African. Rice is such a staple. So these dishes weren't just like Kwame's creations. These are like staple dishes throughout the South, throughout West Africa, throughout the Caribbean. And I wanted to tell the story of those within the head notes of why they stood the test of time, because they're snapshots in history. They're not like people taking credit for this dish. It's really just like it was born out of circumstance, whether that's rice or jerk chicken or even fried chicken.
Right. And, when I was going through this book, I thought about the concept of like when we think about America as a melting pot, but then there's, this other theory that actually we're more like a tossed salad. We're not losing our identity, right? But we can exist together. And I think you really accomplished that really well in the recipes in this book.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, and it's forever evolving. And I think the more like cuisines are starting to get highlighted, whether it's like Laotian or Taiwanese, or East Africa or Northern African food, I think then we start to really look at our dishes in America and like realize that like we're more similar than we're different. Every single nation has like a rice dish. Every nation has a meat on a stick, or a grilled meat, or a smoked meat dish. So yeah, that's what this book was about, and just to share that with everybody.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, I think we could talk about the like American aspect all night, but I want to talk about family.
Yeah.
Because you dedicate this book to your mother, Jewel Robinson, who you're very close with. And she also had a huge culinary influence on you because of both her like background culturally, but also because she is a chef and caterer.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a little bit about your family and how they've influenced you, in your culinary aspirations and also just in your life and this book?
Yeah, well, family is a big part of my life. And within my family, like cooking is a mainstay. Everybody knows how to cook in my family. Everybody has their 1 to 3 signature dishes that they pull up with at the family reunion or when we get together. And I think it's because of what African Americans had to endure in this country. Before Jim Crow was erased and there was like heavy segregation. um, Black people didn't go out to eat at restaurants. And even when it was lifted, even though it said it was legal on paper, you may be harassed if you go there or worse, right? So we had fish fries in the back of our house. We had juke joints. We had barbecue spots. We had convenience stores. And my family was always the one who had the restaurants. So, my great grandmother had a restaurant, my grandmother, my grandfather. So within my family, that was always super important was food. And you're from Louisiana, you know how important food is down there. Like that's the thing that we don't argue on, or we may argue on like what's better because everyone just wants to eat good. So that's what really heavily influenced me. And that's why I decided to dedicate it to my mom, because she passed on those stories to me. And without her, without those matriarchs in our families, those things die. And she wasn't willing to let that happen.
Yeah. And you told this beautiful story about, well, you told a few stories about your grandmother, Cassie,
Mm-hmm.
and how you came down, I think you met her at the airport in Lafayette, which is
Mm-hmm.
a town in South Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
And you went to, Evangeline Parish where she grew up,
Mm-hmm.
and you just kind of like experienced this part of Louisiana that you're not going to get, on Bourbon Street. Like you
That's to know
experience,
someone. Mm-hmm.
right? You experience like Mardi Gras in like a very, small town, but birth town of Mardi Gras kind of way. Um, can you tell us a little bit about your grandmother, Cassie? Because I loved hearing about her book.
Yeah, my grandmother, she's a special woman. She was a child of a pastor. She lived in like a small house with like 5 other siblings. Um, and she really is the glue to the family. Like she knows the family tree and the family history. Like I met up with Tiffany Derry like 5 years ago, and we started talking about where we're from. And she said she was from Beaumont. And I called my grandmother and she asked me her last name. And she was like, "That's your cousin." You know what I mean? Like she knows everybody in the family and she keeps it all together. And being there, it showed my family history. It showed that, especially having a living representation. She was born in the town next to her because it was the only hospital that allowed Black people to visit. And even when I went to Mamou, Louisiana, Mardi Gras was still segregated. There was a white side and there was a Black side. And then with that, I saw some of the foodways. I visited my cousin, and he had these live squirrels. Well, they weren't live anymore, but they seemed like they were frozen in time in the freezer. Squirrels, like stacks of them, and hunting for all types of animals and cooking it up in gravy, and but showing me how to make cracklings from scratch. And this book was more cathartic than anything for me. The recipes came easy. It was just stuff that I grew up eating. But like telling those stories made it a little bit more involved.
Yeah. And one thing I thought was really special about this book, because your background is so varied, Trinidad and Tobago, Nigeria, living in DC, and being close to Ethiopian cuisine. I was able to find my recipes in this book.
Mm-hmm.
Being a Louisiana native, and you put a recipe for cracklins in this book. And I don't know how many cookbooks that kind of cater to home cooks, as I think this book does quite well. Are you going to find a cracklins recipe? And also, you talked about your fine dining background, so you write these recipes from scratch with all of these beautiful sauces that I'm like, hey, I want to make this, and I want to like upgrade my home cooking game, like for real.
Yeah, yeah. Having that pantry is key. because it allows you to be so versatile with your cooking. If you have in your and the Black kitchen, probably across the globe, I'm using Black as like a blanket statement, but the Black experience is not monolithic. The Black, kitchen, it starts with the pantry because it cuts down cooking time for a lot of our stuff. So we have these sauces, we have these marinades, we have these purees, we have these pickling liquids. They're already done. So when we're making something, we're combining everything together to create something beautiful. But a lot of these things came out of necessity, came out of like an act of preservation, and they turned out to be delicious to the point that we're still using them today, even though refrigeration is avid, So I think this book is a great, I think it's a great piece of like education in just like seasoning and you know what I mean? And like making sure you have, Creole spice. We call it house spice, just on hand, and season everything with that liberally. And then you can start cooking everything.
Everything. And I love how you talk about that, because like every culture kind of has their version of, I call it Creole seasoning, you call it house spice, but you talked about, one of the chefs that you met in culinary school, who was from India, and was it the GGP, the ginger garlic?
Yeah, puree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and how, that kind of ends up in everything. So the pantry section, when I first saw the book, I was like, why is this the first chapter? Because often, like the pantry section is kind of like, it's just kind of like, how, whatever.
Yeah, sprinkled throughout or something. Yeah.
But I realized like, oh, this is like the secret sauce. This is the mojo. This is what's going to really transform your cooking. And again, because I think this cookbook is like recipes that like people will be cooking, which is like for dinner, for brunch, whatever, which is very exciting.
Yeah. It's an all-purpose cookbook also. Just like that seasoning is an all-purpose seasoning. There's breakfast recipes in here, whether it's ackee and saltfish or rice and eggs, there's desserts, there's dinner, there's lunch, like, crawfish, or jambalaya, or red beans and rice, so like, I think this is a great cookbook to have in your arsenal if you want to like understand American cuisine, for that a lot of people, experience.
Yeah. And I want to talk about one of the stories that you shared about one of your first food memories. And I think it was around Christmas time, because your grandmother came up to the Bronx where you are, and your mother had some shrimp shells and was making shrimp stock. And she had the crawfish tails with the fat on. And if you don't know about crawfish tails with fat on,
that's it.
Kwame's going to tell you about it in this book. You told that story like so beautifully. It really like made me a bit emotional, but then you went on to kind of like advocate about shrimp stock, which I loved, because again, you're like, you keep bringing things back to how home cooks can just cook better in a simple way, such as like save those shrimp shells, put them in the freezer, and make a stock out of them.
Yeah, and that's why I think this book is an all-purpose book, because if you read through it, I'm really just teaching you tips to like just be a better cook. And I tell people all the time that are like, oh my God, I don't know like how I can like what if I don't execute this right? I'm like, listen, you're not on the operating table, you're cooking dinner. So everything is going to be okay, and use these recipes as a guideline. If you don't like, too much acid in your food, like remove some of the lemon juice. If you don't like too much heat, cut back on the peppers or the house spice. So, and then it teaches you, tips, like you said, like if you're peeling shrimp or you're cutting chicken for a dish, like save those bones, save your vegetable scraps. All those are flavor that can be added in other recipes. And a lot of these, especially the pantry, can be applied to other recipes. I have like green seasoning and ginger garlic puree and jerk paste. You can make salad dressings out of that. You can use it to marinate vegetables and cook them any way you want. You can use all these stuff to grill. So I think this is like the building blocks of deliciousness. That's what it really is.
I love that. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about like the West African influences in your life, and then how that kind of presents itself in this book because your father
Mhm.
is half Nigerian, and you ended up going to Nigeria as a very young child, all but 10 years old. And
Mhm.
you're talking about like using scraps, and we think of that as like, oh, sustainability, zero waste, where in so many other places, it's like we're using this because, like, of course, we're not going to waste
It's
anything. Because
edible. Yeah,
if you have to grow something to eat it or go catch it and kill it to eat it, it
exactly.
changes things.
Exactly. And I urge more Americans to do that and see what kind of meat consumption they have, after that. Because like in Nigeria, if I wanted a 10-piece chicken wing bucket, I had to raise 5 chickens, and that took 6 months. So yeah, I think food waste in other nations, that's not even a thing, because like if something is edible, like why aren't we eating it?
Yeah.
uh, that's why we're taking that thing's life. It's to help sustain ours. So it's not about being picky. It's not about choosing what's the best parts of the animal. It's completely utilizing it for respect for that animal, for what it gave to us, or even that vegetable. All of it. We're eating all of these things, and we're also in the process making it insanely delicious.
Mhm. So yeah, so I mean, when you went to Nigeria, your mother sent you there to learn respect. Did
Mhm.
you end up learning respect?
Not right away. I'm gonna be honest with you. I came back probably worse than when I left, of having that experience of like living in a third world country. But as I got older, I started to really appreciate the things that I had here in America. Like running water, electricity, access to food, things that we really take for granted, and even just access in general, like access to like healthcare or education or job opportunities. And that's where I think my hustle comes from, is like knowing that a lot of people don't have these options. So I would be doing a disservice to so many not to take advantage of every opportunity that comes my way.
Yeah. And I mean, I think I mentioned to you, I spent some time in West Africa earlier this year, in Benin, which is right next door to Nigeria, and then also in Senegal. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
very excited to see some Senegalese recipes in this book. Because honestly, I would say between chabajan, which is like the Wolof way of saying rice with fish,
Yeah.
and the chicken yassa, those are some of the best dishes I've ever eaten. And you give us those recipes in this book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
I
thank you.
thought it was. You're welcome. I thought it was important to include that. I don't know many books where I can go to for a go-to like a goosey soup recipe or jollof rice recipe or even chicken in stew.
Mhm.
And it was always something that I would love to have seen in cookbooks, right? And I think that's what our job is here on this earth, is kind of like leave it a little bit better than what we found it.
Mhm.
Give people that access, give people that representation, so they can see themselves in the things that they enjoy.
Yeah. And
And
I
that's
think,
what like sparked me to do. Yeah, that's what sparked me to do like my last restaurant, Kith and Kin. Lots of like Afro-Caribbean and Black foodways were like banished to mom and pop shops. And I was like, why? Why do we have to do that? So I put it on fine china. I paired it with wine and cocktails. And, I did it in a world-class restaurant. And, we ended up in the Michelin Guide, and, James Beard this and Food and Wine that. And, all those accolades, they're cool. But really for me, it was having people see themselves on a plate, having people be able to celebrate their culture while celebrating a special experience, which, we don't really have in our communities like that. We propose to people at French restaurants, we have graduations at Italian restaurants, and being able people were proposing over a plate of oxtails and hiding a ring in a rum cake. It was that's what really meant the most to me out of that experience. And that's why I wanted to carry it through with this book.
yeah. And, I had the absolute honor and pleasure of having a meal at Kith and Ken. And like it really did open my eyes as well to so many dishes that, even living in New York, it's like, even though I had seen them, you don't necessarily, like, there's so much going on in New York and so many cultures, you're not necessarily experiencing all of them.
Mhm.
But when you're at Kith and Kin and you get a plate of roti, oh my gosh, like you're
Ah,
gonna dig in.
exactly. And you eat with your hands, and the dining room's lively, and everyone's talking to each other. It's so beautiful, and I love seeing more restaurants pop up around the country like that, like Kanji and Bene on Eagle and things like that. So it's really cool to see this renaissance of these types of restaurants riddle all of America now.
Would you say this book is almost like a continuation of where you were like conceptually with Kith and Kin?
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of these recipes, I served at Kith and Kin, and it's a continuation of the memoir, and it tells that journey from like at the end of that to like where I am today. And that was really, that was coming off the heels of my first restaurant, which was the first book, and then the Kith and Kin era was really me diving deep into my culture. And with this book, I was able to go back to Trinidad and Tobago with my grandfather, and go to Nigeria and go to Louisiana, and dig my toes into the sands that my grandfather played on in Tobago, and ride the floats with my grandmother and Mamu, and eat boudin from a gas station. So it was really, really beautiful and important for me to put this out, but more importantly was to like reconnect to that side of me.
Yeah. When you were going through all those processes and like, getting those stories for this book, what kind of emotional process was that for you? You said it was cathartic, but like how like were you in your feelings most of the time? Like how like what was your thought process through all of that? Because that feels powerful.
For me, I knew it was just important to me as it was to my family. I think a lot of those things are forgotten, and a lot of people aren't like, "Hey, grandma, let's go back to where you grew up and let me see what's going on." So like I think for my family, it meant so much that I had a real keen interest in my heritage and my culture and my lineage. So that's what was special for me, just as much as like documenting all this, but like truly living in that moment and seeing their face of pure enjoyment was everything to me. And, I don't take it for granted at all.
Yeah, and I think you talk about this in the book when you talk about the source code,
Hmm.
because you talk about like experiencing these cuisines, through your mother preparing it, or through, eating at the same little spot in the Bronx with the chicken with the mojo sauce and the rice and beans, or is it moyo?
Moho.
Mojo.
Yeah.
Like, I might not know how to pronounce it, but I sure know how to eat it because
Hey, moho, quesadilla, it's all good. Let's go.
but yeah, so you talk about those experiences and the source code. So, and then you share those experiences of seeing this stuff kind of in a firsthand way of, seeing the boudin being stuffed into the casings when you peeked into the back of the gas station. So I just thought all of that was like, it was not just like powerful, but it adds that word authenticity because it really adds that to your perspective. Because it's one thing, to experience something kind of, through the perspective of a parent or a cousin or an aunt. But when you get to go to that place and look at the water with the rice
Mhm.
paddies or the crawfish ponds, that changes things.
Yeah, you have that connection to it. It's more than just an ingredient, it's a story. And
Yeah.
when a dish tells a story, it has a soul. You're not just cooking for perfect seasoning, you're cooking to share an experience with someone. And when you have all those memories in the Rolodex of your mind, I believe it just makes you a better observer of the world and appreciate food more. When
Yeah.
someone's cooking for you, like it's a selfless act of love. Food is the only art form that we ingest, but it's also the only art form that truly sustains life.
Yeah.
So it just changes your perspective, and it makes you more receptive and appreciative of a meal.
Hmm. Yeah. And I feel like not only like, first of all, you've been very busy with promoting this book. Congratulations.
Thank you.
can you tell everyone where they can find you later on tonight? Are you going to be on TV somewhere?
Oh, I'm gonna be on Seth Meyers tonight. Seth
Okay.
Meyers, the late night show. And then tomorrow I'm doing MoFad as well.
That's the
And,
Museum of Food and Drink in New York City.
and I think you can log in virtually if you go onto their website. And then I'm in Chicago and then Dallas and Portland. So like I'm all over the country. But yeah, Seth Meyers tonight. I actually just left set. So you'll be able to watch that shortly.
Okay, awesome. And I know you just got back from Wisconsin.
Yeah, it
I
was
saw,
this morning.
I saw a picture you posted. It looked like a packed house.
Oh my goodness. It was beautiful. And I was in Madison, Wisconsin. The food there was great. The weather was nice. It's right on the lake. But I got to meet a lot of people. And I think the reception of this book it's blown me away, honestly, how people are really taking it in and just trying to learn as well as cook great food.
Yeah. Okay, Kwame, can you make us hungry? Can you describe maybe like one or two of your favorite dishes in the book? Or
For sure.
yeah, make us hungry. Paint the picture.
So one of my favorite dishes is the curried goat. It's like my earliest food memory. So you take goat shoulder, you can debone it or cut it up with a bone on. You marinate it in this green seasoning, which is this puree of green onions, ginger, garlic, thyme, Scotch bonnet peppers, cilantro or culantro. Culantro is like preferable if you have it, and you puree that, and then you marinate the goat in that and like this rich toasted curry powder. And you let that sit for a day, preferably like 2 days, but at least a day. And then you sear that off. You get it nice and golden brown. And at the bottom of the pan are going to be this like golden bits of fond, which is like caramelized, protein from the goat. Pour chicken stock on top of that. You have a little ginger garlic puree, onion, and then you let that simmer until the goat is just like falling off the bone, super succulent. And while it's cooking, you remove the pan, you move the lid so it cooks down to a nice thick sauce. And then you'll serve that with dal puri roti, which is like this thin flatbread with crushed split peas in between it. And you just rip a piece of that off, dip it into the goat, and you're good money.
Okay, that worked. I think, but I think I had that at Kith and Kid.
I think you did too.
I remember that dish, and my God, it was good. So yeah, I might not cook a lot of meat as a baker, but I might have to give that one a go.
You got to.
And so I want to talk about a kind of broader concept, because in this book you don't really hold much back.
Mm-mm.
You don't find a lot of cookbooks where someone so openly describes experiences that I think, like in our America, make people uncomfortable. Because there's this idea, that cookbooks are supposed to be very comfortable, right? Mm-hmm. You describe great comforting food and we should just feel comfortable, right? But you do that in this book. You did it in your last book. What is it about you that makes you kind of unafraid to just go there and tell that truth?
I just think it's dope to be just walking in your purpose. And I don't think I do it like, I don't go out of my way to do it. It's just who I am. It's just like just being, genuine and saying what's on my mind. I try to do that, which with as much poise as possible. But I think it's important to like tell your truth and also give a voice to the inaudible. I think it does people a disservice if you dance around things and tiptoe around history. And I think you can tell both sides of that. And it can just be a part of our history. It's not to make anyone feel bad or anything. It just happened. But with telling the story, the full story of things, I think you need to get into that and weave all that in there. So that's why it's so important to me. And I think that's why I'm able to do that so freely, because that's just the way that I live my life, in the regular day to day.
Yeah. And there's something else you say throughout the book, that you make sense of the world through food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes more sense when you think of it that way, because like I said earlier, like dishes are just a snapshot in time. So if I'm telling the story of a dish, I'm just telling the history of it. I'm not picking on anyone, or I'm actually just giving people information, and you can do what you please with that, because at the end of the day, there's a delicious recipe. So like you can just cook that. But having the knowledge of those things, it kind of makes sense of where we are today, what was happening at that point in time in that particular place. And it'll just give you a better understanding of foodways.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I want to like take it back a little bit because there's something that you said. You were talking about working in these fine dining restaurants, in Midtown Manhattan,
Mhm.
where, the emphasis is on, maybe like French techniques or these things that are very specific to fine dining. And then you like head uptown to go home. So you
Mhm.
were going home to Harlem or to the Bronx, and you're eating like a whole together different type of food, but it made you feel at home. It was just as comforting and it was just as delicious. And,
Mhm.
I think like that kind of like dichotomy, that's something that we see, um, just with your path in this industry, going to CIA, which is, one of the top culinary schools in the country. But, you didn't have like oh, here's point A, here's point B, and you're just going straight there. No one does. How have you been able to kind of like stay, going towards your destination and not getting derailed, even when you've had setbacks? Like, how have you kind of bounced back from the big disappointments that you've had, that we've all had?
I equate it to like my mantra is that life is such a gift. And you can't choose what that gift is, right? It still is a gift at the end of the day. If you fail, if you're having a bad day, if you're happy, if you're in love, if you're heartbroken, if you're laughing, if you're crying, it's a gift to even be feeling those emotions because we are alive. Now, I don't want to stay in any of those particular places because, the duality of those feelings, it makes life in and of itself. So I know nothing is permanent. I know nothing is like if it's always going to be a bad day or always going to be a good day, and I'm able to pick myself up and keep going. And I've removed the fear of failure. Failure is something that someone else puts upon you. That has nothing to do with you. You're in control of yourself, and your emotions, but you're not in control of what other people think about you. And that's none of your business. So I try to live in that nugget. And yeah, some days are harder to push through, but in all encompassing, I just try to live in my purpose and worry about that and not worry about like other things that's happening outside of that because I can't control it.
Yeah, I think you summed that up really well. And I feel like that what you're describing, that nugget that you try to exist in, the family reunion conference that you produced with Food and Wine last year, that's coming back this year, that's like how I felt at the conference. So you really like kind of put your signature on that entire event.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that conference is really, really special. And it's just it's a conference where people can just be themselves and just be, and not feel judged and not feel that they can't talk about anything, or discuss certain things. It's really just kind of a moment of like letting your hair down, being yourself, and absorbing all the information and love that you possibly can.
Yeah.
To speak to Valerie's point, for those of you who don't know much about it, it's a 4-day food conference that happens in Middleburg, Virginia, at the Salamander Resort and Spa, and it's a celebration of Black foodways. We bring in like 45 food professionals, and we do everything from panel discussions to parties to breakout sessions. You can go zip lining with Gregory Gourdet. You could learn about the history of barbecue with Rodney Scott. We have late night parties and special guests, a Sunday service. So it's a beautiful 4 days of Black excellence, but also just like Black acceptance. And yeah, I'm excited to do that again.
And some of like the best food you will ever eat in your entire life. Also,
it's kind of ridiculous. The food is really good.
Yeah.
Really.
Okay, before we open it up to Q&A, I just wanted to know, are there recipes in this book that are like recipes you would cook yourself for dinner on a weeknight?
Yeah, definitely like the jerk chicken recipe is a standout. The Mom Duke shrimp, I'm actually making that tonight. The curried goat is something that I make often. You know, the chicken and stew. I honestly, any of these recipes I'll eat any day of the week, multiple days of the week. So yeah, the answer is yes, and the other answer is all of them.
Okay, I like that answer. All right, yeah, let's have a little time for Q&A.
Thank you both so much. I am so hungry and ready to get home and start cooking. So thank you for that wonderful conversation. We have one question that's not really a question, but it's a great comment. So just a quick shout out from January, who says, your house spice is amazing with an H, is my go-to seasoning for everything.
Thank you, January. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, so we have a couple questions about plant-based meals from this book that I want to ask. So one attendee wants to know if your sauces can be used for plant-based meals, and the other asked for a good substitute if there is one that's vegan for crawfish and egusi soup. So do you have anything about plant-based meals in your cookbook?
Yeah, I mean, the sauces can definitely be used for plant-based meals, and anything that calls for a protein, you can swap it out for a vegetable and obviously like reduce the cooking time substantially. The substitute for egusi soup for crayfish, there's not really a substitute, to be honest. So I would just omit the crayfish powder, and you'll be fine. You won't miss it because you don't know what it tastes like. So you'll be all right.
And I would like to say, I noticed that in a lot of recipes where you might find butter, you use grapeseed oil, which I thought was like really clever because it's something that's going to carry those flavors really well.
Absolutely.
But like, a lot of us are like lactose intolerant or have other issues where butter is an issue. And I was really excited to see that.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's better for you than like canola oil. So yeah, I thought it was like a good substitute.
Mm-hmm. Another question for someone who's ready to start cooking from Benjamin. He asks, what are the top 3 most important pantry items to keep on hand, in your opinion?
That's a great question. I would say house spice, then green seasoning, and then the sofrito. All those things work in pretty much every single nationality, every single culture that you're doing, and using that to help enhance those flavors work really, really well. I mean, you can stuff any of those 3 things underneath the breast of like roast chicken. You can rub those things on a steak and let them marinate, and it won't like carry the flavor too much. It just will like enhance the flavor profile, whatever you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. I asked this question to both of you, actually. For someone who's sitting at home going, oh, this food looks so amazing, but I'm not a good cook, or, I don't know where to start. How would you recommend getting into cooking from other cuisines that might not be as familiar? And do you think your book's is it something that a beginning home cook could do? Do you think there's some stepping stones? Like where would you tell someone to start with that process?
I think every cookbook is a beginner cook. As long as you can read, you can follow a recipe, right? So like, I think let's start there. And then we're not on the operating table. We're just cooking dinner. So I think relieving that pressure of like, you have to get this perfect, I think is really, really important when cooking, because all you have to do is put a little love in it, take your time, make sure you have your mise en place set, and then follow the recipe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I mean, I agree with what Kwame said. Read the recipe start to finish before you start cooking so that you have an idea of what's to come. It's like you have a head start about what's about to happen, and be patient. And I like to say practice makes perfect. You're not necessarily going to do something perfectly the first time, but you will learn something so that you'll do it better the next time.
Yeah, that's great advice. Don't pick a new recipe when you have people coming over for dinner. Maybe, but all good. This question is, let's see. Okay, Kevin's asking the real questions. He says, any recommendations for someone who wants to cook like a top chef? So I'm not sure you can get us quite there in the span of this talk. What would your top tips be?
What you do is get your ingredients together and then put a timer on. That's it. That's how you cook like a top chef. Anyone can do it. Just it's under pressure.
And even if you mess up, sell it to the judges.
Just sell it and own up on your mistakes.
Kwame, who are your professional role models?
My professional role models are, I don't think they are in the kitchen. It's like, Barack Obama, LeBron James, people that are like changing their communities and have defied the odds in what they're doing. And, I plan on, writing more books, hopefully opening up more restaurants. Um, I started acting recently as well. So that's something I'm really, really getting into.
That's great. Well, that leads perfect segue into the next question. Will one of those restaurants be in Atlanta?
Who knows? Are you
Wall
going to
Place-
invest? How about that? You're going to invest? You're going to put your money where your mouth is.
Someone on this call, I'm sure, can. So the person who asked if the restaurant's in Atlanta, just give Kwame a call after this. I'm sure you can work it out. A couple more questions. The dreaded question, but I'm going to ask it. But knowing that you just had a cookbook come out last week, so it's okay to enjoy that for a little bit. But you said you're working on, thinking about opening more restaurants, more cookbooks. What's next for you after this tour is done?
Sleep.
Yeah.
Sleep is what's next. The family reunion, honestly, is what's next for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's the food festival I was talking about. It's August 18th to the 21st. So that's what's next.
Mm-hmm.
I will be there.
Yes, you will.
I'm bringing my whole family again, but more people.
I love it. I love it.
I love that. Such a great idea for a gathering. This is an interesting question. Tamara asks, what advice would you give to folks who want to write a cookbook to honor their culture?
Start writing things down, start really documenting the dishes that make you happy, the dishes that bring you comfort. And I think the book will write itself after that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let's see if we have any more questions. You're very efficient. Someone asking about ingredients. I know this can be tricky with cookbooks. Sometimes they call for, if you don't live in an area that has a lot of grocery stores, can be a little tricky. So are your ingredients easy to obtain, or do you have any advice for people that might live in more rural areas or just places where they don't have as much access to things?
Yeah, they're pretty easy to attain. Yeah. But if you can't find something, go to Amazon. Amazon has all of these ingredients, all the obscure things that can be there within the week. So I would just like Vallery said, read ahead, read the recipe through. Anything that you can't find at your local shop. And also you can swap things out. If you can't find a certain pepper, use a different one. If you can't find a certain protein, use another one. If you can't find goat, just use, another piece of meat that can be braised, like short rib or something. So I would say just have fun with the ingredients, and don't get too tied down to like following every single step or every single ingredient.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Great advice. I'm always surprised at the breadth of things that are available on Amazon.
Everything.
Pantry ingredient wise is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And they're delivering most everywhere now too, which is great. Last question from Carla. You touched on this a little bit, and I love what you said about how foodways are such a great entry point to learning about history because it's so approachable for a lot of people. So she asks, do you think knowing the history of the food you are cooking makes you a better cook?
I don't know. If you can't cook, you can't cook. No amount of history is going to help you. But I think it makes you a more conscious cook, and it makes you just appreciate food more. You got to put in the work to be a better cook, and put some love into it. But I think it's an important part of cooking, and it's just one extra step. So I encourage everyone to buy My America. Learn about the history of these dishes, and it will help you become a better cook.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Kwame and Vallery. It was such a wonderful conversation. I'm going to echo that. Please buy your copy of the book. There is way more than we were able to get to tonight in there. Lots of hidden gems. I saw we actually are low stock. So if you get on there and we're out of stock, you're going to get a follow-up email to this talk. Just reply to it or reply to me and we'll get you your copy, and we'll honor the discount as well. So thank you again, Vallery and Kwame. It was such a wonderful conversation.
Of course. Thank you. Take care, everyone. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you so much. And to everyone in our audience, thank you for your wonderful questions. I just put a link in the chat to future author talk programs. We would love to see you again, whether it's virtual or in person. Hope everyone has a safe and wonderful rest of your Tuesday. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.